Good morning. It's always great, regardless of the talks, because it's got coffee and biscuits, which is super. But this morning, I'm really looking forward to this talk by Dr. Marta Talevi, who is in the School of Economics. We talked briefly before by Zoom a while ago about weather forecasting, so a bit of overlap there, kind of stuff we love to see in the Earth Institute, where people can bring their skills together. And we were both at the water workshop, weren't we? That Fiacre and Mary organised at the Earth Institute water workshop that went on. Was that last week? I'm losing track of days. Last week, and that was really good as well. So it's nice to see people being brought together. Today, Marta's going to talk to us about the energy, food, water nexus in a changing climate in sub-Saharan Africa. Thanks very much, Marta.
Thank you. Yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for coming. As we say in economics, there's no such a thing as a free lunch or free coffee and cookies. So you'll have to listen to me for 10-15 minutes to earn your food today. So my name is Marta Talevi. I'm assistant professor in environmental economics at the School of Economics in the College of Social Sciences and Law. Before joining UCD, I was at the Institute of Environmental Studies at the Free University of Amsterdam. And before that, at the School of Environment at Yale, and I did my PhD at the London School of Economics. So I'm actually quite used to being in very interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary environment. So it was great to become part of the Energy Institute and to have the chance to connect and reach out to people. So I wanted to present today some new research I've got myself into. Yeah, some new research that I got myself into that it's very interdisciplinary and for which I'd love to get more collaborations, maybe with some of you. So my background or like my specialties are project and policy evaluation, impact evaluations, mostly of anything related to energy access, energy efficiency, energy transition, sustainability, but also environmental protection, climate mitigation, and climate adaptation in general. So in this project, I really want to, so the three case studies, or like the three projects I'm going to present today, are really a chance to showcase what I've been doing with some colleagues in Africa, from Africa and based in Africa, who are leading this project and from the design to the implementation and analysis part. So for Africa, of course, one of the priority is trying to improve agricultural productivity, while at the same time adapt to a changing climate that's becoming more variable and more difficult to predict, and trying to do this without harming the environment. So like mitigation is part of it as well. So agriculture in Africa accounts for 32% of the continent's GDP, but 65% of the continent labor force. Okay? So there's a lot of people are dependent, or their livelihoods depend on the agricultural sector. And a lot of it, 85% of the agricultural output is from smallholders that only have like small plot of land. And this increases the risk, of course. Like there's limits to the risk diversification they can have. Just to give you a few more numbers, like 75% still prepare their lands using mostly hand tool, because access to power and energy is still an issue in rural contests and last mile contests especially. And only 6% of total cultivated land is under irrigation. So most of the agricultural sector, especially smallholders, subsistence farmers, are dependent on rain patterns that are becoming increasingly variable and unpredictable. And this is where sort of like my background in energy, my expertise in energy come about. So having access to energy, electricity specifically, that is ideally low carbon, like solar, it's a good, it can be a good option for off-grid contexts, like rural contexts that are not connected to the grid infrastructure. And they can provide the opportunity to store your agricultural produce. So having access to fridges and freezers, for example, but also process the food. Value added in agriculture in Africa is still very low compared to the rest of the world, just because the produce are often sold fresh as they are. There's limited processing capacity. And the thing that brings us to the water, like to the connection with water, is solar irrigation. As we say, irrigation is still very scarce. It's very unaffordable in most cases. So maybe as cost of solar panels and solar powers reduce, solar irrigation might become more and more viable around the continent. So the first project I wanted to talk to you about is this project led by Professor Rosé Nyekbeme from the University of Parakou in Benin. And it's about providing rainfall forecast and extension services to smallholders in northern Benin. So what we did with this project, it's a randomized controlled trial. So we pre-registered the design. And the idea was to provide farmers that are part of the project with two services. The first one is rainfall forecast. Every 3 days, they would receive an SMS on their phone. So we're leveraging access to ICT, leveraging like access to not smartphone, access to phones that are becoming like increasingly available in the continent. So they would receive an SMS every 3 days with the rainfall forecast for the next 3 days. And at the beginning and at the end of the season, they would also receive seasonal forecasting. So some like information on what the season is going to be like. So it's going to be a wet or dry season. And when the onset of the rain is predicted to be and when it's supposed to be stopping. Okay. Of course, to provide this information, we had first training sessions to make sure farmers are able to like open the message. They know where the message come from, because in Benin, like when I was there, there's a lot of scam calls and scam messages. So we needed to build trust, and we needed to build the capacity to read and interpret this information that they were given. And here you have some examples of how they were providing. Like these posters were left in the villages that were part of the studies, showing them what 1 millimeter would mean in practical terms compared to 12 millimeters or no rain. And the second service that we pair with this one was extension services. So agronomists and extension workers would help the farmers decide what to do then. Right? So this is not only, it's not just weather forecasting, but it's more moving towards impact forecasting. So given that I know what the rain is going to be like in the next 3 days, what's the impact that that's going to have in my agricultural practice? What am I supposed to do? Or what can I do like with this information? And this was done in 2 different treatment arms. So we have 35 villages, they're pure control with 30 households in each village. So about 1,000 people in the control group, and then 1,000 people each in the 2 treatment arms, again, from 35 villages each. The first treatment arm, we provided extension service in the more traditional way. So there were extension workers living in the village or in the nearby area, and they would provide in-person support. So every 2 weeks or every month, they would visit the village, talk to the farmers, and the farmers could ask questions. The second arm that we were testing was actually providing extension service over the phone as well. So farmers had access to a call center. They could call the number anytime with their question. And this was managed by the BREDA NGO, which is this like agricultural research NGO funded and based in northern Benin. And they would contact, again, extension workers, an expert, even from the ministry, to ask the question that the farmers wanted to know, and then call the farmers back. Right? And they also just had follow-up over the phone every about 2 weeks or a month to make it comparable with the other study. Why did we want to test this, like providing extension support over the phone? Well, for one, we've seen with the pandemic, for example, that accessing villages or accessing certain regions might not always be possible. This happens during the rainy season, which is the agricultural season. Just logistics of travels is very costly, very complicated. And the government, of course, has limited budget. a limited number of extension workers that might not always be able to reach all of the villages or not very frequently. So they wanted to tell, or they were interested in this possibility of providing at least some of the services remotely. Okay, this is our study area in northern Benin, and we can select the randomization of the villages in the 3 groups. And here you can see some pictures from the extension service that were provided and the training that came at the beginning of the study on how to interpret the weather forecast. Okay. And Aline Alukutu, she's the coordinator from the Breda NGO that implemented this project, and that was really pivotal in designing the project. They made like a small film, a small like documentary of what the project was like, and the farmers really loved it. They were super interested. They keep asking if they could have the service next year as well. So they're trying to scale it up and make it like something that can be provided on a stable term. Things we are testing, things that we're testing here are so we conducted a survey before the service was implemented and one after, and we're testing how farmers adapt to this information and services they have in terms of crop choices, but also in terms of the cost they put into buying seeds, buying fertilizers, and buying pesticide and herbicide. The reason being that this sowing, but also applying fertilizer and pesticide is very dependent on the rain. Right? If it doesn't rain at the right time, or if it rains at the wrong time, it means you have to rebuy all the inputs and redo everything all over again. So we also test so we're also going to test whether this makes improvement in terms of labor allocation. So work hours of men and women, you look at that separately. To see if this provides some efficiency and time savings as well as cost savings. Okay, the second project that Dana was involved with, this was led by Dr. Ashlu Tigabu, again in Benin. As we said, from the project with weather services, we saw that there's dependence from rain-fed agriculture has its own risk. And there's very limited processing that is being done in the sector. So we wanted to know what's the situation of the off-grid solar sector from the supply side. Are there local installers? How viable, how expensive the technology are? What's the policy that has been put in place? So we did this technology innovation and diffusion system analysis, and I'm not going to get into it. But we found that, so we analyzed different, what we call functions in the off-grid solar sector in Benin. And we found that the main barrier is financial resource mobilization. So there's really a lack of financial access, both for the companies that are selling, the local companies that are selling the solar system, but also, of course, from the customers, especially customers in rural areas that have this very seasonal income that depends on the rainy season. So this was the main barrier. On the other side, there's a lot going on in terms of entrepreneurial activities, new ways of providing these services rather than selling a solar panel as a good, they're selling it as a service. So there are pay-as-you-go options where the farmers or the customers can pay every week or every day, just a part of it. So they're sold in installment. And there's a lot of trust in the technology. So they see it, customers or people in Benin see it as very viable, so much so that even some people that live in grid areas that could be connected to the grid choose to disconnect because they see the grid as very expensive and prefer to go with a solar system. One main issue that they have, which I guess it's common all over the world actually, is with the quality of the product. So there's a lot of informal sectors, sales that sell uncertified products that are not, that don't perform as well. They don't actually have the capacity that they're being sold as. There's no after-sales service, which is a critical component because we saw a lot of breaking down of the system, of the different components. So the after sales was really key in this respect to build trust in the technology. And again, here we were interested in looking at solar irrigation specifically. And in Benin, solar irrigation is used not only especially for veggie agriculture, but also increasingly for aquaculture, so to farm fish, for fish farms. And one of the main barriers here is that solar, compared to diesel water pumps, for example, solar has a very high upfront cost. So the capital cost, the capex is very high. But then once you've installed it, it's basically operating it is basically free, right? Because you don't have to pay for the fuel. You don't have to pay for the diesel every time you use the pump. It just comes from the sun. And another problem that companies that sell these products have is that solar pumps are a bit tricky to sell in installment, because once they're put on the ground, they're very difficult to remove, right? So if there is non-payment, it's very difficult to repossess the system. So like this is a bit of an issue, and again goes into the access to finance. And the final project, very quickly, that I'm currently working on is specifically on solar-powered irrigation. And I'm working with the Environment for Development Network that UCD is now becoming part of. And I'm working with the teams in Uganda, Ghana, and Ethiopia, as well as with ministry stakeholders from the agricultural and energy ministries of these countries. And we're interested, first of all, in mapping the existing and planned solar-powered irrigation projects in the country, because governments, but like international donors and NGOs are investing a lot in solar irrigation. And then we want to conduct viability analysis, trying to see cost and benefits in specific sites. So based specifically on the crops that are being grown, on the local price of diesel, on the local cost of installing solar, what are the, when in time these benefits are realized. And finally, we're going to look both qualitatively and quantitatively at how solar irrigation can contribute to climate resilience. So in terms of diversifying crop options, increasing yield, and time savings for the farmers. Yeah, so that's my last slide. Next steps and collaboration opportunities. I would definitely want to do a bit more on the sustainability part, on the hydrology, trying to understand, one problem of solar irrigation is over extraction of water, exactly because you don't have to pay every time you extract. So we want to also do something about like citizen science and low-cost tools to monitor water extraction. And in general, we want to look a bit more at the climate trends. So like climate scientists, we would be interested in looking at how these are changing in the specific areas we're looking at. And of course, how these projects might be, have diverse impacts depending on how changeable the climate is at the moment. Yeah, and that's it for me. I hope I didn't take too much time.